Pull out any two plastic bottles from the same pack, same brand, same factory, same day. Hold them up to the light. One might be very slightly cloudier. One might feel a hair thicker on one side. The caps might not click at exactly the same force. Most people assume that's just wear and tear or bad packaging, but those differences were baked in before either bottle ever left the machine, and the reason comes down to something happening inside a steel mold at around 450 degrees Fahrenheit that nobody can fully control. I've been thinking about plastic a lot lately, not in a worried way, more in the way you start noticing something everywhere once you understand what it actually is. Plastic, the broad category of synthetic material most of us grew up treating as boring and disposable, turns out to be one of the most physically complicated things humans manufacture at scale. And the process behind almost every plastic object you own, phone cases, food containers, car dashboards, toothbrush handles, is called injection molding, and it has a variability problem that the entire manufacturing industry has been negotiating with for 70 years. Here's how injection molding works. You take thermoplastic pellets, small, uniform, looks like fish food, melt them into a liquid, shoot that liquid into a metal mold under enormous pressure, let it cool, pop the part out, repeat thousands of times a day. The basic idea is genuinely simple. The execution is where things get complicated. Every single shot, that's the actual industry term, one shot of molten plastic into the mold, is technically a different event from the one before it, and a remarkable number of variables are competing at the exact same moment. Start with the raw material. Thermoplastic pellets aren't a single pure substance. They're made of polymers, long tangled molecular chains, and those chains vary in length even within the same bag from the same supplier. Longer chains flow differently than shorter ones through the mold. They cool at slightly different rates. Some pellets absorb moisture from the air while sitting in the hopper before they're melted, and moisture in the melt causes tiny pockets and inconsistencies in the finished part. Manufacturers dry the pellets first, always, but in a factory running around the clock, conditions drift. The molecular weight distribution of any given batch is never perfectly uniform, and that inconsistency travels all the way into the finished product. Then there's temperature. The barrel that melts the plastic runs at a set point. Polypropylene, for example, melts around 230 degrees Celsius, but set point and actual temperature are never the same thing at the same moment. Heater bands cycle on and off continuously. A shot that happens right as a heater peaks will have slightly more fluid plastic than a shot that happens at the bottom of that heating cycle. The difference might be less than 5 degrees, but 5 degrees changes viscosity, which changes how completely the mold fills, which changes wall thickness in the finished part. The part that comes out is physically different, not dramatically, but measurably. Pressure matters just as much. The injection system pushes molten plastic into the mold at pressures that can reach 20,000 pounds per square inch, more than the pressure sitting at the bottom of the Mariana Trench, but valves wear over time. Check rings inside the screw mechanism develop small variations with use. The machine might deliver 99.7% of the target pressure on one shot and 100.2% on the next. That 0.5% swing sounds trivial until you're making a medical device or a precision component where tolerances are measured in microns. Now here's the part that genuinely surprised me when I first understood it. Even if you could somehow hold temperature, pressure, and raw material perfectly constant, which you cannot, but hypothetically, the cooling process alone would still create differences between parts. Plastic shrinks as it cools. Everyone in manufacturing knows this and designs for it, but it doesn't shrink uniformly. It shrinks more in thick sections than thin ones. It shrinks differently along the direction the plastic flowed versus across it. And the mold itself, solid steel, is also expanding and contracting very slightly with every single cycle. This is called differential shrinkage, and it's the reason injection molded parts often have a slight warp to them, or why a plastic panel that's supposed to be flat isn't quite mathematically flat when you put a straight edge against it. Engineers compensate for this in the mold design by building an intentional asymmetry, making the mold slightly wrong in the opposite direction so the part comes out approximately right. It works, but approximately right is doing a lot of work in that sentence. Multi-cavity molds make all of this more interesting. Most production molds don't make one part at a time. They make 8, 16, sometimes 64 identical parts simultaneously, each in its own cavity, fed by a runner system from a single injection point. The engineering challenge is getting molten thermoplastic to travel the same distance at the same speed through the same cross-section and fill all 64 cavities at the exact same moment. In practice, cavities closer to the injection point fill faster. Cavities at the corners run slightly cooler. The runner system is designed with a balanced layout to minimize this. Engineers call it a naturally balanced runner, but balancing the geometry doesn't fully cancel out the temperature gradient across a large mold. Studies published in plastics engineering literature have documented cavity-to-cavity weight variations of up to 2%, even in well-maintained, properly balanced molds. In a gear, a valve, a connector, 2% is the difference between a part that works and one that fails. Color variation is where most consumers actually notice this, even if they don't know what they're looking at. The colorant in plastic, almost always something called master batch, which is a concentrated pellet of pigment blended into the base polymer, disperses during melting, but dispersion depends on how vigorously the screw mixes the melt, and that changes based on fill levels in the hopper, back pressure settings, and how much wear the screw has accumulated. A batch of parts made Monday morning with a freshly filled hopper mixes slightly differently than parts made Thursday afternoon. With the hopper running low, the color comes out close, not identical. This became a genuine business problem for consumer electronics companies in the 2000s and early 2020s. Samsung and Apple, along with their contract manufacturers in Shenzhen, invested heavily in tighter incoming material controls and real-time colorimetry checks on production lines specifically because customers were noticing. A phone case sold as matte black should be the same matte black as every other unit in that colorway. Subtle batch variation was generating returns. The solution wasn't eliminating the variation. That's not physically possible. It was detecting and sorting it faster. There's also a phenomenon called sink marks that's worth understanding. When thick sections of plastic cool, the outside skin solidifies first, while the inside is still liquid and still shrinking. Eventually, there isn't enough material left to fill the void, and the surface pulls inward slightly. You get a shallow depression, usually oval-shaped, almost always in a predictable location, based on the part geometry. Designers try to avoid thick sections precisely because of this, but sometimes the function of the part requires them. Every part with a sink mark is technically a different shape than a part without one, even if they rolled off the same mold in the same hour. So what does manufacturing actually do about all of this? The honest answer, they define tolerances and accept variation within them. Every plastic part has a specification, a range of acceptable dimensions, weights, and surface properties. Parts within spec ship, parts outside spec get rejected or reground. The definition of acceptable depends entirely on the application. A plastic toy has wide tolerances. A fuel system component has extremely tight ones. The tool that keeps this manageable at scale is statistical process control, SPC. Sensors measure temperature, pressure, and cycle time on every shot. Software plots the data continuously and flags when a process variable is drifting toward the edge of its acceptable range before parts actually start going out of spec. The goal of SPC isn't to create perfect parts, it's to keep imperfect parts predictably imperfect within known bounds. Quality control in modern injection molding is fundamentally about managing a distribution of outcomes, not achieving a single outcome. What I find genuinely interesting about all of this, and I think it's worth sitting with for a second, is that the variation isn't a manufacturing failure. It's a direct consequence of physics that engineers have spent 70 years learning to work around rather than solve. Polymer simulation software in 2026 can model exactly how a specific thermoplastic will flow through a specific mold before the mold is even cut from steel. Adaptive control systems can adjust injection pressure mid-shot in milliseconds, and the fundamental variability, molecular weight distribution, thermal gradients, differential shrinkage is still there, still present in every part, still requiring compensation in every mold design. The engineers didn't beat the physics, they got very good at predicting it. Next time you pick up any plastic object, a lid, a cap, a housing, anything, you're holding something that came out of a thermal and mechanical process that was tightly bounded but never fully controlled. The part in your hand is one outcome from a range of possible outcomes. Most of those other outcomes were close enough to yours that they shipped too. If you've ever noticed a color difference between two supposedly identical plastic products, or a lid that fits slightly differently than the last one, drop it in the comments. I'm genuinely curious how often people notice this once they know what to look for. And if you want more of this kind of behind the scenes look at how ordinary things actually work, subscribe. There's a lot more of it coming.